Okay, good morning everyone. Happy Monday. If you're in Vancouver, you'll see it's a nice beautiful day outside, so hopefully you'll get outside a little bit later today. Fingers crossed. Hope you had a good weekend. Let's see, so who's here? Casey's here. Good morning, Casey. Jenna's here. Good morning, Jenna. Nice to see you on Saturday. That was cool. Monica's here. Good morning, Mashid. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Banamere. Good morning, Jimmy. Okay, so as we wait for people to trickle in this morning, I guess this is week 10 already, which is pretty amazing. Good morning, Krish. Pretty amazing. So we're getting toward the end here, which is a little exciting, but a little scary as well. We still got lots to do, but I think we'll get through it. I'm not worried. What we'll do today is we will review what we talked about regarding the Big Bang Theory on Friday. I have some other kind of movie messages to talk about with you today. Maybe a little bit of music video for you to talk about. And then I have a documentary coming up as well, talking about the experiences of young women in society and what kind of things they feel are holding them back. So I've got a few videos for us to look at today and tomorrow, a series of questions to look at, things we can talk about. So that's kind of what we'll do. Today and tomorrow. Also, I'll remind you later again, but I believe the second micropaper is due tomorrow, so don't forget about that. And if I could ask, can you please email me a Word document or a Pages document to hand that in? Last time I was flexible because I wanted to be flexible, and I wound up with some people emailing me and some people sharing a Google Doc and some people I'm putting it in Microsoft Teams, and so I had things all over and I kind of lost track of a few of them and they didn't get marked until later. So if you email me a Word or a Pages document, that'll make it much easier for me to keep them all in one place and make sure I don't miss anything when I'm marking. So that'd be great, please and thank you. Baha's here. Good morning, Baha. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive in here, okay? So on Friday, we were talking about discourses of sexism. So how messages or how social messages about sexism are transmitted through media, and how watching those media normalizes certain roles for women and men, certain inequalities that persist, and it kind of apologizes for them. As well. So on Friday we looked at chick flicks, right? So these are romantic comedies. They're usually targeted at women, but of course men can and do watch them too and enjoy them. I enjoy them. But we said that the general plot line of these films was one where often we see a young woman, a character who has a great life and she has, a good career and friends and family and hobbies. She kind of has all these things going for her, right? She's built herself a great life, but the message is that regardless of how great her life is, there's always something that's going to be missing for her, right? And that thing that's missing is the guy, right? So she's often kind of encouraged by her friends or her family members to kind of, get out there, right? To maybe meet new people or try new things. And of course, all of those are sort of coded language for you need to find a man, right? And so that's what happens in these films, right? She usually meets this sort of Prince Charming. She meets this, handsome guy, and he has to convince her that she's missing out, right? He has to convince her that, you know, if only they were together, her life would be so much better, right? And initially she's reluctant, right? She doesn't really, either she doesn't like this guy or she doesn't really want to change her life, but he manages to break through, right? He manages to sort of wake her up from this delusion that her life is that good, right? And we made a comparison here to the Sleeping Beauty fairy tale, right? Where this girl is literally in a coma. She is asleep, and Prince Charming here is the one to wake her up, right? He's the one who's going to bring her back to life, so to speak. Good morning, Duong. And so we said that in many of these films, and not all of them, the message that is reinforced is that women's lives are incomplete without a man, okay? And so when they finally find their man and they sort of get married, we see that the female character becomes more personally fulfilled. Her style changes, her, you know, hair changes, everything seems better just because this guy has, you know, come into her life. What's really interesting, actually, and don't quote me on this because I'm not sure if I'm remembering the study correctly, but I think what scientists who study happiness usually find is that people are usually as happy as they are before they get married and after. Their levels of happiness are the same, right? And so people tend to go back to their sort of set point of happiness. And so if you imagine before you sort of meet someone, you're at a certain level of happiness, and then you meet someone and you start dating and it's really exciting and your happiness goes up to here, and then you get married and that's exciting too. But over time, people tend to return to their regular level of happiness. And so they're, you know, there's an exciting time, of course, but people tend to go back to, you know, the same level of happiness they had before. Don't quote me on that because I could be wrong, but I think I have read studies that have suggested that. But anyway, that's not how it goes in the movies, right? In the movies, everything is better once the guy is in her life, and they live happily ever after, right? We also talked about the Bechdel test, right? Where this came out of a comic strip, but it's something that people actually talk about. Good morning, Pika. That's okay. Something that people actually talk about, where in order to pass this test, a movie has to have two female characters in it. They have to talk to each other, and they have to talk to each other about something other than men and the man in the film. And a shocking number of, good morning, Chan, a shocking number of movies do not pass this test. And so, again, what's kind of happening here is that we see over and over again that certain types of, good morning, Sam, certain types of roles for women are being repeatedly shown to us. We're being taught that, you know, women really need a man, and their lives will always be incomplete. There'll always be something missing without that man. And so we tend to absorb those ideas, and sometimes we sort of act them out unconsciously in real life, right? That kind of led us to this idea of misogyny, right? And we said that misogyny was a prejudice against, or a dislike of, or a contempt for, or an anger towards women, okay? And we said that we see it in numerous different ways. Sometimes women are excluded from certain groups, maybe certain companies, maybe certain teams. Maybe we see hostility. We see hostility or negative comments directed toward women, or we see men kind of using their privilege against women. Sometimes we see their efforts, or women themselves are belittled or disenfranchised, so their voices are left out of the conversation. Sometimes it's violence, sometimes it's sexual objectification. And we said that we can very easily find these types of ideas in movies and in many different types of media, right? And so, good morning, Ivan, and good morning, Manish. Have a look at this. A 2016 study conducted by the think tank Demos. The think tank is kind of like a research institution that studies certain things. This think tank they concluded that 50% of all misogynistic tweets on Twitter come from women themselves. So that's pretty interesting, right? So a lot of the hatred or negative comments that get expressed towards women actually come from women themselves, right? And that's an excellent example of internalized oppression, right? Where social messages are absorbed by all of us and then they're acted out. And they're acted out even when they don't benefit our group, right? So just like the blue-eyed kids way back in Jane Elliott's class, when they were told they weren't smart enough or they weren't good kids, they started to believe it and they started to act it out. And so here we have negative social messages about women being circulated, and sometimes women act them out, even though those messages disadvantage them, right? Yeah, and so that led us to the Big Bang Theory here. And what I asked you to do is to keep track of the social messages being transmitted about women and about men. And so I just want to see if we can remember a little bit. So I'm going to ask you, this. So what social messages were being transmitted about women and men in this show? What did we see? What did we see in this show? Sort of stereotypes or behaviors or ways that men are and ways that women are? What kind of things did we see? Okay, so Casey says one of the things we saw is that the male characters in this show, so Raj and Howard and Leonard and Sheldon, they lack the common traits of leading men in movies, right? Yeah, so sorry, I was just reading the other comments there. So the video was trying to juxtapose, there's a fancy word for you, but to sort of compare, right? To place in opposition two ideas of masculinity, right? And so on the one hand, we have a more traditional masculinity, right? The man is strong and tough and, in control of his emotions and, maybe sort of very dominant in terms of how they deal with women, and very dominant in terms of how they deal with other men as well, right? The big, strong, alpha male jock stereotype on one hand, but of course, like Casey says, all of the men in this show don't express any of those, right? They are not strong, they are not tough, they're nerdy, right? They're into all sorts of kind of uncool things. They're very socially awkward, right? They're very shy or uncomfortable around women, and so they kind of oppose these two ideas, right? So yeah, they definitely lack the common traits of leading men in movies. That is true. Baha says men do not live without a woman. I guess that's true. As the show goes on, they all manage to find themselves girlfriends and wives. Spoiler alert. Um, so Howard will get married to Bernadette. I think Sheldon will get married to Amy. I actually didn't see the end of the show. I watched it for a little while. Raj, I think, will end up with somebody. Is it Emily? Could be wrong. And Leonard and Penny will wind up together as well. So that's probably true. They all wind up with some sort of female partner in the end. That's true. Um, this is true, Karen, but I'm going to. Sorry about that. It's a garbage truck. Um, this is true, but I want you to save this one for a little bit later, okay? Because this will become more important very shortly, okay? So we're gonna put a pin in that one because that'll come up later. Um, Casey says women are being harassed in a lot of ways. Yeah, so we see in that short clip that a lot of a lot of comments are being made about women, right? The way that women are. Um, there was Sheldon's comment when he was doing his little um, his flags YouTube video where he says the flags of countries who were completely destroyed and the women he thinks were responsible, right? So we have comments like that. We have comments about women's biology, about women being, not good at science. We have comments about women being um, irrational or emotional or hormonal or all of these things, right? All of these comments get made, and we laugh at them, right? Well, many people laugh at them. I don't know if you laugh at them. Anthony goes, yes, that's probably part of it. Although part of what we're laughing at is we question these guys' ability to sort of do that, right? They're very awkward around women. They're very kind of shy, and they're not sure what to say. And so if we take this as an important aspect of what masculinity is, then that's connected to KC's comment here, where these men lack sort of the common traits of masculinity, and so that's kind of funny, right? So, and okay, that's good. So the second question is this one here, and I didn't ask you this one on Friday, but what is actually being laughed at? Okay, so when we see The Big Bang Theory, when we watch it, where are the laughs coming from? Okay, because sometimes we instinctively laugh, right? When something's funny, we laugh. It's funny. Things that are funny, right? But it's okay, but it's also a good idea sometimes to look at why it's funny, right? Why are people laughing at The Big Bang Theory? And people were, because it was on for 11 years, right? You can't have a sitcom, you can't have a situation comedy that's not funny be on for 11 years. So it was clearly a funny show to many, many people, but who was being laughed at, or what was being laughed at? Who or what was being laughed at? Even just take a guess if you don't know. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'll be right back to you. I'm just setting something up here. Okay. So okay, so yeah, the jokes that guys are saying to women. So yeah, those things do get laughs, right? So um, Sheldon's comments to women about, you know, their menstrual cycle or their hormones or their irrationality or emotionality, those get laughs, right? People laugh at those things. Right. So the men are being laughed at too, right? Because they are, you know, they're pursuing women, right? Particularly, oh yeah, they all, except for Sheldon for the most part, all of them are in the pursuit of women, but they're very desperate in some cases, but they're also very ineffective, right? They don't really know what they're doing. Um, and then Karen says the struggles women face are being laughed at because the charade. Charade sweet and socially awkward, so it can pass. Also, I think written to please misogynist men. Right. So okay, there's two good things in here, Karen. So one thing is that you are correct, right? So the stereotypes and the sort of sexist jokes that are being used here um, are being laughed at, right? We're referencing these stereotypes about women, and we're laughing at them, and that's where that practice of lampshading came in, right? And if you remember in the video, they said that lampshading was sort of hiding something, like pointing out that something is there, but then, you know, sort of ignoring it, right? And so they showed that with a couple of racist jokes about Raj. And so lampshading was, you know, the racist joke was said, and then Raj would say, hey, that's racist, and then they would just move on, right? So the writers of the show get to use the racist joke, and nothing bad comes of it because they point it out. They're like, oh yeah, we know that's racist. That's why we said it, right? Because it's a joke. And so the same thing happens with women, right? Is that a lot of sexist jokes are used, but they're used in such a way that they're not meant to be serious, but they still communicate that message. They still reinforce stereotypes, right? Whoops. The other part of it is that, again, we let these guys off the hook because even though they engage in a lot of creepy behavior, right? So they sort of stalk women. Don't stalk women, guys. That's terrible. They stalk women. They spy on women. They say creepy things to them, and it's kind of laughed off because, again, these guys are so socially awkward that you know nothing will come of it, right? If the same thing was said by characters who were sort of big, strong, tough, sort of typically masculine men, the things that were said would be a little scary, right? And the audience would be like, whoa, this guy's this guy's super aggressive and gross, right? But with these guys, because they are so inept around women, because they're so kind of not competent, you laugh at it. But the problem is, here, of course, is that it's still scary, right? So, if hopefully girls, none of you have been stalked out there. But when someone is stalking you or sending you a lot of messages or things like that, it's scary and uncomfortable. And it doesn't necessarily matter how masculine the guy is. It's still scary and uncomfortable and an unpleasant experience. It doesn't matter. So, but again, in the show, in The Big Bang Theory, that's not the way it is, right? You laugh it off because it's Howard, and Howard is harmless, but his behavior is creepy and inappropriate, right? And it makes women feel unsafe. It doesn't happen in the show because they frame it differently, but in real life, there's no show, right? Sorry, Karen, there's two more things here I'm going to pull out of your comment because it's really good. Part of the reason why someone like Howard gets away with this on the show is because on the show we know who Howard is, right? We know he's harmless. We know that he's a good guy. He's just a little misguided and awkward. And we know that he would never actually hurt anyone, right? And so he's allowed to do creepy things. He's allowed to do kind of stalkery things. And that's okay in the show because, again, the audience, us, we know that Howard is harmless. But of course, in real life, if you are a woman and you are being stalked, or if a guy is constantly saying creepy things to you, it's uncomfortable, but you also don't know who this guy is, right? We know Howard is harmless, and we also know Howard is a fictional character. But in real life, it's not a fictional character, and we don't really know who this guy is, right? Maybe he's harmless, maybe he's not. But either way, it's uncomfortable, and it makes women feel unsafe, right? So laughing it off in the show like this is okay because of the way the show frames it, but it reinforces a certain type of behavior that is not acceptable, right? And Karen says, I think it's written to please misogynist men. I think you're right there, Karen, and actually I might back it off a little bit and say that actually the show is more targeted at men. And so what often happens with this show is that, and I've asked around a little bit, men who watch the show don't often see it as sexist, right? Because again, it's invisible, right? They don't understand the perspective of women, right? And we talked about that from the very beginning, that dominant groups often have a narrow view of society. They often don't see things that minoritized groups see. This is a perfect example. And so when men watch The Big Bang Theory, they often don't see the sexism. When women watch The Big Bang Theory, they commonly do. And so, is it a show to please misogynist men? Maybe, but it's definitely a show to please men. You're bang on there, Karen, I think. Yeah, there was a lot in there. Okay. Erica says when they laugh when they do something that makes women embarrassed, for example, when they put webcams on toy cars and control the car. Yeah. So, yeah, these guys acting in a creepy way is played up for laughs, right? And again, in the show it's funny, right? In the show it's funny. But again, because of the way the show is framed and written, we, the audience, know the characters, right? These guys are all acting in inappropriate ways. They say inappropriate things, but as the audience, we also know that they are harmless, right? None of them would hurt anyone. They are just awkward and misguided, right? But again, in real life, you don't know that, right? And so when men make comments about women, when they sort of act in creepy ways, it scares women because women aren't an audience watching TV. They don't know who guys are, right? And some guys are unsafe, and so yeah, it's funny in the show, but in real life it's not funny, right? It's very uncomfortable. Their humor covers the real message they're trying to portray, and it's new to the eyes of the viewers since geeky guys aren't usually the type to act out those behaviors. Yeah, exactly, and that's what allows. I think that's an important statement, Casey, because I think that's what allows the show to get away with all this stuff, right? That's what allows them to say the type of lines they say, because these geeky guys, these nerdy guys, aren't who you would expect to do these things. And if you took the Big Bang Theory script and you gave it to a bunch of actors who were sort of big, strong, kind of, alpha masculine men, that's a totally different show, and it's not it's not an enjoyable show. It's an uncomfortable show. So yeah, their geeky behavior, these guys' geeky behavior is the way that the writers are able to tell these types of sexist jokes, right? It's the ultimate lampshade in this show is the fact that these guys are nerdy, and the fact that they are presented as good guys who just, do silly things. But again, those silly things in the real world are not silly. They make women feel unsafe and uncomfortable, and it's not cool. It's wrong, right? Okay, that was good. That was really good. So what I wanted to say here, and this leads into my next thing, is that because these sort of narratives and stereotypical ideas are so common, we don't really see them as sexist, right? They are normalized. And so the more that this kind of narrative appeals to us, whether we're looking at romantic comedies for women or whether we're looking at the Big Bang Theory for men, we can enjoy romantic comedies and we can enjoy the Big Bang Theory, but we can also absorb those messages at the same time. And so it's okay to still enjoy shows like this. It's okay to enjoy movies like this, but it's also a good idea to pay attention to the messages that are being transmitted to you, okay? Which brings us to this guy here. Anyone know who this guy is? What do you think? Do you know this guy? Anybody know who this guy is? Baja says no. Pika says no. Erica, no. Was he in a cigarettes ad? I don't think so. Karen. It's possible, but I don't think he was. Sheed says no. Okay. Different generation. So Harrison here, as you can probably see, his claim to fame is an actor, right? So he's been incredibly popular here in the Western world. So as you can see, his films have grossed over $5 billion, almost $10 billion worldwide. Probably one of the most popular actors in kind of Western cinema, okay? Yeah, and his films have been incredibly popular, and his characters have been heroes. So he's always kind of the leading man. He's very heroic. And, I grew up with... oh, is it? Oh, man. That's surprising. Okay, well, happy birthday, Harrison. If you're watching this YouTube channel, you're probably not. Um, but if you are, Harrison, thank you for all your movies. Very much appreciated them. In part, they've made me who I am a little bit. So, thank you. That's funny. How old is he now? He's 78. Is that right? Whew. Wow. Okay. He doesn't look like this at 78, but he looks pretty good for 78. Okay. So, um, many of the films that he's been in have been adventure films, and sort of sci-fi films, and so some of the films you might recognize him from are the original Star Wars movies, and actually the more recent Star Wars movies as Han Solo. It's been in Indiana Jones, both Blade Runners, lots and lots and lots of movies. The Star Wars and Indiana Jones movies are probably his biggest films, but he's been lots and lots of films. But of course, as I'm trying to convince you of here, films are agents of socialization, right? They transmit social messages to us. They teach us about how we should be, right? They teach men how to be men, women how to be women, what it means to be a hero, what society's values are. All of those things are worked into a movie, and when we watch a movie, we absorb those social messages, right? We learn from that movie, even if we're not conscious of it, even if we're not paying attention to what we're learning. Okay, so that brings us to Harrison here. Okay, so I have a second video essay for you that I would like you to watch, and so I just popped the link into Microsoft Teams. Okay, and so it has to do with this video essay has to do with romance in Harrison Ford's movies. And so specifically, how does Harrison Ford's characters, how do those characters relate to women? Okay, and what does that tell us about what kind of messages is that sending to the audience about how men are and how men should behave and how women are? Okay, so I put the link in Microsoft Teams. There's 2 questions. The first question is, what is wrong with Harrison Ford's character's behavior? So it's not Harrison. Harrison's a nice guy. And the second one is, what message do these films send us about men and women? Okay, so just 2 questions for you. And you can watch this video essay and sort of see what I mean. Also, this is totally heartbreaking for me because, you know, his characters were heroes for me when I was growing up, and so watching a video essay like this is kind of painful. It's like, oh, come on, but it's true. The messages that are transmitted in some of these films are pretty negative and pretty destructive, but we'll get to that. So what I'll do is the video is about 17 minutes long, so I'll give you some time to watch that, then we'll take a break, and then we'll come back here and talk about what we've seen. Okay, so that's going to be about half an hour, so we'll come back here at 9:15. Okay, so watch the video. It's posted in Microsoft Teams. Answer the 2 questions as best you can. There's lots of stuff in the video, and then at 9:15 we'll come back here and we'll talk about it. Okay, so hope you enjoy. Answer the questions, type them out, then have a break, then come back here. Okay. Okay, people, and we're back. So, I hope you had a good break. I hope you enjoyed the video. Um, what do you think here? So, we've seen Harrison Ford play three characters here: Han Solo in Star Wars, Indiana Jones in the Indiana Jones movies, and Rick Deckard in Blade Runner. Right. So, what's wrong with the behavior of these characters? So Mashid says all of his characters treat women badly. Okay, that is definitely true. What else can we say? What else can we say about that? What's wrong with their behavior? And quite a few things are wrong. Mashid, you're definitely right, but there's more. Casey says there are patterns in his excuse me, patterns in his roles, predator and prey situations. Yeah, so we see in a couple of cases we see a bit of a predator-prey situation where the male character is trying to pursue and trap the female character, right? A little uncomfortable. Karen says he thinks women want all of these sexual advances. Yes, and of course the way that the script is written and the way that the film is kind of framed, they in fact do, right? We see that they eventually respond positively, but the question is that true to real life or not, right? And so, and of course the answer is no. It's not true to life, right? What else do we see? What else is wrong with his behavior? Oops, sorry, there's more here. Casey says aggressive behavior that can lead to sexual assault and asserting power over women. Yes. So some of his characters are overtly aggressive toward women, right? Particularly Rick Deckard, who basically sexually assaults Rachel, and you might even say that he rapes her, right? So both the Han Solo and the Indiana Jones characters are a little overly aggressive, a little overly assertive, but Rick Deckard really crosses the line, right? Baha says he's conveying that when a woman refuses to interact with a man, that does not mean she doesn't want him. Yeah, so there's this message that no doesn't mean no, right? That's part of what's coming out of this, is that when a woman says no, or when she backs away or rejects a man in some way, that doesn't mean no. It means keep trying, right? Or not yet. That's the message that we're getting from this. I think these two questions I asked you are going to overlap, but that's okay. Tika says, yeah, he doesn't listen to the opinions of women. Yeah, he doesn't really listen to what they tell him, and mostly, and in these clips, what the women are saying is no, thank you, I'm not interested in you. Back off, right? But he doesn't listen to any of those things. Good, that's good. And sorry, and Thika also says, and there's a tendency to be violent as well. It's worth noting that even though we only see a few clips, and you may not have seen any of these movies yourselves, but even though we see only a few clips of these movies, all of Harrison Ford's characters in these films are kind of action heroes, right? So in Indiana Jones, there's lots of punching and fighting and shooting. Same thing in Star Wars. Sometimes there's a little punching and there's lots of laser gun shooting, right? So there's lots of violence in both of those movies. Same thing with Blade Runner. There's lots of shooting and punching and stuff like that. So there's kind of we already know that those male characters are very capable of violence because we see them use violence in other parts of those films. And so, the implied violence in some of these scenes is very real because we know that Indiana Jones can easily, punch people in the face. We see him do it a lot in the movies. And so that threat of violence is really real. And that's the same thing with the James Bond clip, right, from Spectre. We know James Bond can be a violent guy, right? We see him be violent in numerous scenes leading up to it. So it's very easy to imagine him becoming violent in that situation as well, because we've seen it, right? We know he does that sort of thing. Manish says he thinks deep down that all women like him, but it's not always true. Yeah, he assumes he can just sort of take what he wants, right? And some have to get involved romantically. Yeah, so yeah, he doesn't interpret rejection as rejection, right? He feels that, oh, they're just saying that, right? Or they don't mean it. Okay, let me ask this question. And again, I think both of these questions might have a lot of overlap to them, but we'll try it anyway. So, what are the messages that are being sent here, particularly to men, but maybe to women as well? Because again, both men and women will watch these movies and they will absorb social messages from them. And so what kind of messages are being sent? What are these movies telling us about men, about women, about masculinity, about how to act, about what a real man is? What are these films, what kind of messages are these films giving us? We might have touched on a few of them already, and it's okay. It's okay to repeat them here. Okay, so KC says strategies that put women in an uncomfortable position for them to prevent saying no can be a sign of rape culture. Yeah, so he says that using violence, using coercion, and sort of trapping women are all really harmful. Practices, right? I saw a while ago on YouTube this ad kept coming up before some of the videos that I was watching, and I don't know why this ad was coming up. I wasn't watching anything associated with it, but it was an ad for a guy. There was an ad for a guy who he was like a coach, and he was teaching guys how to pick up women, how to meet women. And so if you paid money and subscribed to his website, he would teach you how to meet women and how to talk to women and how to ask them out, sort of thing. And in the short video before, you could see him, doing this, and you could see him doing these very things that Casey is talking about. And so you'd see him walk up to a woman in the street, and he'd walk like directly up to her in a really direct and assertive way. So she would kind of stop, and then he would introduce himself, and then he would go to shake her hand, and she would shake his hand, because that's kind of what you do when you're being polite. But he wouldn't let go of her hand, right? He wouldn't let her back away. He wouldn't let her escape, right? And so it allowed him to keep her there so that he could keep talking to her. But it was exactly this thing, right? It was a way to prevent them from saying no. It was a way to prevent them from backing away or saying, hey, I don't really want to talk to you, I'm going to keep going now. But he shook their hand, and then he didn't let go. And so it was really uncomfortable for me to watch, and I'm sure it was uncomfortable for the women in the video. But again, he was presenting himself as a coach who could, help guys meet women. But he was doing exactly this thing. He was putting these women in an uncomfortable position and then keeping them from escaping, which was kind of creepy and uncomfortable and not cool. Mashid says men ignore the revokes of women because of their advances, and they refuse to listen to women when they say no. Yeah, and men use force to get what they want. Yeah, all of those messages are being transmitted, right? So the message that when, you know, if you want to, you know, meet a certain girl, or sort of be in a relationship with a girl, or kiss a girl, or whatever, that, you know, you just keep pushing, right? And eventually they'll say yes. It's just about persistence. That's the message that's being transmitted here. And of course, that's not true. Often the more persistent you are, the less successful you will be in the end, because you'll just wind up annoying people. But yeah, his characters keep pushing, right? They keep advancing even though women say no. And sometimes they use force to get what they want, or the implication of force, right? They imply force. So in the Blade Runner clip with Rick Deckard and Rachel, Rick Deckard doesn't use any force, right? He doesn't physically force Rachel to do anything, but that, you know, when he punches the door closed, that's a pretty clear signal, right? That's a frightening threat of violence. And so he doesn't use physical force, but it shows that he might, right? If Rachel doesn't do what he wants her to do, that he will use physical force, right? Super scary. And these movies give us the idea that women's anger isn't real, right? So when a woman gets angry, it's not to be taken seriously. It is to be dismissed. It's like, oh, you know how women are, right? That's kind of the message behind it. And so all of these characters, in that clip, I don't think Rachel's not angry, so we don't see it there. But in the other clips with Indiana Jones and with Han Solo and Princess Leia, his characters don't take their anger as real, right? They don't validate it. They don't believe it's something to be taken seriously, right? That's a problem. Karen says men have to pursue a woman until she says yes, right? So the idea that no doesn't mean no. No means keep trying, right? And eventually you will get your yes. Carol says women secretly want sexual advances, and and when a woman says no, she's just playing hard to get, right? And this is wrong. You know, if you you can't expect a woman you don't know to, you know, agree to be your boyfriend on first meeting, right? So it's not going to be like that. So you are going to have to, you know, there is a bit of a progression, but again, you know, no means no, right? And so we see a very clear evidence of that in the Star Wars clip where, you know, think about how uncomfortable this is, that Star Wars clip where Princess Leia is working on that thing in the spaceship, whatever it is, and she's in a very confined space, right? So she can't really move, she can't really escape. Han Solo comes in, he gets really close to her, she can't back away, she can't, you know, she tries to. She tells him no a bunch of times. She says, you know, don't do that, don't touch me, back off. She backs away. She tells him she doesn't like him. She says that she, you know, doesn't like him because she likes nice men and he's not a nice man, she says. But they kiss anyway, right? And so, again, in the movie, it makes sense because we know, as the audience, we know that Princess Leia kind of likes him. We already know that. But of course, in real life, Han doesn't really know that, right? And so he kind of keeps pushing, even though Princess Leia's like, no, I don't like you, back away, don't touch me, I only like nice men, you're not a nice guy, you're a scoundrel. And so she, you know, says no to him about 8 times, and he still kisses her anyway, right? And that's red flag, that's bad behavior, right? So Yeah, all of those things are true, right? We see lots of bad behavior, and because of how the movie is written, and particularly how the women respond, it allows those kind of messages to be transmitted, right? Because all of those characters use their sort of strength, their intimidation, they use coercion, um, they are persistent beyond the fact or beyond the point where they should really say, okay, she's not interested in me. They're persistent, they don't take no for an answer, they don't take women's anger seriously, they don't pay attention to what women say or do, they just sort of try to take what they want. All of those things are really, really harmful. And in real life, they are super scary and uncomfortable and destructive and illegal in some cases, right? But of course, in the film, they are portrayed a certain way, right? Because we know he's the good guy, right? In all of those films, he's the protagonist, he's the hero, and so we know he's the good guy, and the female characters actually respond to it, right? And so in the Indiana Jones clip there, where they're in the Indian village, and Indiana Jones is there with Willie Scott, and Willie says, "No, I'm not going to Delhi with you. I'm not going anywhere else. I've had a horrible time. This, I'm out of here," right? And so she leaves, but he, physically grabs her and pulls her back in. Of course, he uses the whip, and it's very, flashy, but he kind of grabs her and brings her back in, and her reaction is not, "Get off me, you creep." It's, oh, she swoons and then they kiss, right? And so it's a very non-realistic thing to do, but the behavior of the female characters helps the male characters get away with this in the film, right? So let's see here. Yeah, so I think we said all of these things, right? What's wrong with Harrison Ford's character's behavior? I'm sure the real Harrison is not like this. I'm sure the real Harrison is a sweetheart. Um, he's married and has kids, and I think he's a nice guy. But his characters don't behave very well, right? And so we said, yeah, they don't listen to rejection, right? When a woman says no, when she backs away, when she says, "I don't like you," his characters don't listen to them, right? They discount or ignore women's anger, right? They don't take women's anger seriously. And they coerce women, right? They continue to make advances. They don't take no for an answer. They use intimidation. They use physical force. And in some cases, they use violence to get what they want. And, excuse me, sorry, I just sneezed. And all of these are bad news, right? When you are engaging in any intimate activity with someone else, consent is important, right? And consent means agreeing to it, right? Saying yes to it. And so you always need someone's consent to, kiss them or, be intimate with them or have sex with them or whatever. You always need consent. And consent cannot be given when there is a threat of physical violence, right? Consent has to be offered freely, right? You have to be free to say yes or free to say no without consequence, right? For Rachel in Blade Runner, she says yes, but she says yes because Deckard tells her to say yes. And there is a pretty clear threat of physical violence. And so if Rachel says, "No, I'm not kissing you, I would like to leave," he may get violent with her, right? And so that's not consent, right? That's coercion, right? She's threatening physical violence unless she goes along with what he says. And that's sexual assault, right? That's not seduction, that's not romantic. Even if the music playing in the background is very romantic, that's not romantic, right? Yeah, and so some of the messages that come up here, and I think we got these too, is that men must pursue women, right? And again, no doesn't mean no. You keep pursuing until until you get a yes, right? Until they say yes, because the stereotype is that women like to play hard to get, right? Women like to be chased, and again, there are real limits to how much chasing is appropriate, and what we see in these films here is in no way appropriate. Yeah, that women don't know what they want, and their anger and rejections are not to be taken seriously. And so we saw that very clearly too, particularly with Willie Scott in Indiana Jones in the Indian village. She just finishes telling him how, she's had a horrible time. She's not going anywhere with him. She's going home. This has been an awful experience. Goodbye. But then 15 seconds later, she's kissing this guy, right? And so, again, the implication there is that she doesn't really mean what she says, or she doesn't really know what she wants. And of course, in the film, you can write whatever you want, but in real life, women tend to know what they want. And if they tell you that they have had a horrible time with you and they don't want to see you again and they are going home to Missouri or wherever, you can take that as pretty clear evidence that they do not want to hang out with you, right? And so, again, movies are not real life, obviously, but these kind of social messages can get absorbed if people aren't paying attention. And finally, that physical or verbal intimidation is acceptable during seduction, right? So in all of these scenes, the male characters kind of use their bodies, their physical size, and the threat of them using physical force as a way to sort of capture women, to corner them, to push them into some sort of activity. And again, that's all wrong, and it's all sexual assault, right? But again, the way that these films are framed, and particularly the response of the female characters, makes it seem as if it's okay, right? It makes it seem as if these women were playing hard to get, and they did actually, want to kiss this guy all along. But again, that's not reflective of real life, right? And it's harmful and frightening for women to have men behave this way, right? I just wanted to sort of open things up for a second. Are there any other comments connected to this topic? Because there are lots of other things we could talk about in terms of how men and women kind of relate to each other in dating and in relationships, what we see in movies, the idea of consent, the idea of what's sort of appropriate in terms of courtship and dating and things like that. Is there anything else that anyone would like to sort of throw out there that we might want to talk about? Because I'm open to it. Casey's good. Okay. No. Okay. So if you do have something, you can still put it up there, but I'm just going to go back to here. So kind of in closing on this is a little bit of social justice and sexism, but it's also a little bit of a public service announcement as well. So again, prior to engaging in any sexual activity, it should be clear that you and your partner are willing and comfortable and in agreement to continue, okay? And so that's what we don't see happening in these Harrison Ford movies. None of these women consent to sort of being kissed, to being kissed by Harrison Ford's characters. And so consent is not there, right? And so you are kind of engaging in sexual assault. The other thing it's important to remember is that consent can be withdrawn at any time, right? So if you agree to do something with someone and then, 5 or 10 minutes later, you think, oh, I think I've changed my mind. I don't think I want to do anything. You can say no, right? So a yes doesn't mean yes forever. It doesn't mean yes to a particular thing. It means yes for right now. And you can always say, you can always stop things and say, okay, I changed my mind. I'm saying no, I'm out, right? You can always do that. But of course, as we saw in these clips and as we saw in the video essay, these characters here don't obtain or care about women's consent. They are forcing themselves on female characters. They are sort of taking what they want. And taking what they want and being assertive is an important part of their sort of hero and heroism, right? That's what allows them to succeed in the movie, right? As they're, trying to win over the bad guys or sort of recapture something. That sort of ability to be forceful and take what they want works very well in that narrative, but it shouldn't apply to other people, particularly romantic interactions, right? But unfortunately, since all of these films frame Harrison Ford's characters as the good guys, they get away with this stuff, right? They get away with really negative, harmful behavior, and it looks like it is sexy. It looks like it's dramatic. It looks like it's fun. But in real life, it's none of those things, right? It's predatory, and it is inappropriate and destructive, right? And so that's part of the problem here, is that in films like this, men are socialized to see this as desirable masculine behavior, right? And so some of these films answer the question, well, what's a real man like? And these films say, like this, like these three guys. But it's important to remember that these men are behaving in sexist ways, and they behave in ways that are hurtful to women, and they behave in ways that sort of perpetuate inequality and discrimination and misogyny and violence against women that is pervasive worldwide, basically. Okay, that's my little speech. So that's all for today. Don't forget your micropapers are due tomorrow. So tomorrow, please email them to me. Email them in like a Word or a Pages document. If you use Mac, you can send me Pages because I have that. Please email it to me so that I can very easily collect them and keep them all in one place. I missed a few last time because they were being submitted everywhere, and that was my fault. So just email them to me. It'll be easier. Please and thank you. Thank you for being here today and for participating in the live chat. That was really good. I was glad you were able to remember a bunch of things from the Big Bang Theory stuff on Friday. And that's it. Happy birthday to Harrison Ford. If he's watching, that'd be great. I'm sure he's not, but if he is. And so for the rest of you, that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow, or I'll see you in about 10 or 15 minutes for comparative cultures. Okay, so that's it. Bye.